For thousands of years, people have performed strange satanic and pagan rituals that include human sacrifice in order to please and receive favours from strange so-called gods and deities. The hierarchies and European monarchies of old are known to have been involved in the occult for at least hundreds of years. Most people have a very limited understanding of the occult and the strange rituals that the occult perform. This allows Satanists and occultists to perform rituals that include human sacrifice in plain sight without ever being exposed. The media are accused of covering up information exposing possible signs of Satanism in the West and the Moors murders in the UK, as well as the Ted Bundy and Ripper Crew murders, and many other murders committed by well-known serial killers have contained evidence of Satanism and satanic ritual that has often been overlooked. In the case of the West murders, all the victims were missing body parts, including fingers, toes, limbs, and kneecaps. According to some researchers, this is a sure sign of a ritualistic murder. When asked by the police about his connection to sadistic rituals, Fred West answered, "No comment." In the 1940s, there were consistent connections to witchcraft, Satanism, and murder. In April 1943, 3 young boys were playing in Hagley Wood, located in the Worcestershire area, when one of them climbed a large tree trunk which proved to be hollow. Inside, he saw what he first thought was a skeleton of a dog, but upon closer inspection, he saw that the skull appeared to be human. The 3 boys ran and got help. The boy who made the discovery fell ill and died soon after. In his 1969 book, Murder by Witchcraft, Donald McCormack explains about the case. But the most bizarre feature of this crime was that some of the smaller bones of the skeleton, including those of the fingers of one hand, were buried at some distance from the body. This fact not only complicated the police inquiries, but it also suggested this was a most unusual crime. Professor Margaret Murray, an eminent archaeologist and professor of Egyptology, became involved. Dr. Murray, as she was known at the time, was also the leading authority on witchcraft, not only in Britain, but in Western Europe too. McCormack claims, "I have no doubt at all that this clue, that meaning the missing finger bones being buried separately, caused Dr. Murray to believe that the crime was linked with witchcraft. For in devil worship, the hand of an executed person was greatly coveted by the devotees of the cult." McCormack emphasises that the history of Satanism is littered with mentions of the magic hand, where finger bones are buried near the newly sacrificed victim for the purpose of enchantments, etc. The hand of glory is dried and pickled, usually of a man that has been hung for a crime. If that crime were murder, the hand that did the deed would be chosen to make the hand of glory. The hand of glory, sometimes called the main de gloire, has its name derived from the mandrake plant. The mandrake plant is said to have very strong powers and is regularly used in magic rituals. It is still used in contemporary pagan practices such as Wicca and Odinism. The Whitby Museum in North Yorkshire has a hand of glory on display, together with a text published in a book from 1829. In this manuscript, the way to make the hand is as follows. It must be cut from the body of a criminal on a gibbet, pickled in salt and the urine of a man, woman, dog, horse and mare, smoked with herbs and hay for a month, hung on an oak tree for 3 nights running, and then laid in a crossroads, then hung on a church door for one night, while the maker keeps watch on the porch, if it be that he have no fear, and be driven from the porch, then the hand be true one, and it be yours. The Hand of Glory is believed to possess magical powers. In European occult traditions, it is believed that a Hand of Glory could render people motionless, open locked doors, or give light only to the person holding it. In the 1973 film The Wicker Man, the innkeeper attempts to put Sergeant Harry to sleep using the power of the Hand of Glory. Its power is such that the innkeeper's daughter expresses concern that it might sleep for days.
FBI agents were to descend into a world of men as so perverse as to be unthinkable.
Holy shit!
When a box was opened, agents were shocked to find the contents were not drugs, but a fully severed human head. The blood on the neck was still warm.
Let's get more units out.
Further investigation revealed the aftermath of a particularly grisly homicide. Though the young women refused to talk to the officers, it was apparent they were involved in some sort of ritualistic murder. In the bedroom, satanic symbols in a bed apparently used as a sacrificial altar were discovered. In the middle of the bed was a chalice filled with what was certainly human blood.
Real sick.
The creation of an Hand of Glory is not the only reason that sections of the ritualistic performing occults may remove the hands of their victims. In February 2019, a suspected satanic serial killer called Thomas Maldonado Seaver, 48, was arrested and accused of mutilating his victims by removing their fingers and using them to create a devil-worshipping symbol on their bodies. He was nicknamed El Satan Nico, meaning the Satanist. Maldonado was arrested in Barranquilla, Atlantico, Colombia, after the body of Brenda Porra Bruno was found in a woodland area. Brenda was raped and killed after taking her daughter to a disabled centre where Madonna is said to have been working as a driver. Maldonado, who is married with 4 children, was made the main suspect, and reports state that he was in a sexual relationship with Bruno, which her family deny. The suspect was arrested and held in a preventive prison at El Bosque prison in Barranquilla after being charged with murder. Colombian authorities then quickly linked him to the death of 4 men and 2 women. The bodies were found between 2002 and 2004. They also featured hexagrams cut into their skin. Hexagrams are 6-pointed star symbols. They are used in occult practices and rituals. Police believe the 4 victims were all friends of Maldonado. Authorities are also investigating the satanic links of 2 more murders. A woman who was the girlfriend of the suspect until she disappeared, and a 14-year-old boy who at this time is still to be identified. The Dugam Dani people of New Guinea sacrifice the fingers of young girls when family members die. The ghosts of dead mothers are thought to terrorise the town if they aren't given a sufficient number of little girls' fingers. They believe that the ghosts of kings will linger and they can cause harm, so in the past every girl in the tribe contributed a finger when the king died. Some older women have only their thumbs remaining. Shamba are an indigenous group that reside in the Usambara Mountains in northeastern Tanzania. In the past, Shamba members with vision-impaired children chopped off one of the afflicted child's fingers and dripped the blood from the severed finger into the child's eye. The administration of blood to the eye was thought to improve vision and cure a multitude of eye problems. The Shamba people are also said to know a plant that supposedly cures blindness. They believe that the plant loses power if it is touched by human hands, so healers gather it by using their mouths and then spit it into a cloth to be squeezed into the eyes of the afflicted. In 16th and 17th century witchcraft, bones were ground into many potions. Modern day witches do not usually use spells that involve bones, according to Dr. Maxwell Stewart, an academic at St Andrews University in Scotland, and a specialist historian into the study of medieval witchcraft. Dr. Peter Maxwell Stewart says he is sceptical about the New West connections to witchcraft. Most of the talk of modern day witchcraft and the occult is a load of twaddle, he said. I think it is unlikely that Fred West was a member of a coven because he doesn't fit the bill of a modern day coven member, who are usually environmentalists. The magic hand does have some foundation in witchcraft history, however. It dates back to the 16th century, but it refers to cutting off the entire hand, not just the fingers and toes. But there are also reports of witches grinding down the fingers or toes of their sacrifices to make powder to use for their spells or potions. These are things linked to 16th and 17th century rather than modern day witchcraft magic, he claims. As well as old Wiccan and pagan rituals, the use of bones is also used by some sects of Satanists. Most people rule out or do not even consider Satanism as a problem in 21st century Britain, but there is evidence that Satanism and satanic cults still exist and operate on a much bigger scale than we are led to believe. A government-backed report found evidence of children being secretly reared for sacrifice by Satanists in the 21st century. In 2000, a psychotherapist named Valerie Sinerson was funded by the Department of Health to study adult survivors of alleged organised ritual abuse. She said she was totally convinced that satanic abuse existed and that children whose births were not officially registered were being reared for abuse and sacrifice. Mrs. Sinerson, who edited a clinical textbook on Satanist abuse after the controversies in Rochdale, the Orkneys and Nottingham in the early 90s, claims to have evidence of at least 100 ritual murders. Despite this 3-year Department of Health inquiry by the anthropologist Jean Lafontaine into 84 alleged cases of ritual abuse, no evidence to support their claims was found. Jean Lafontaine commented on the story saying, "It is not surprising to me that patients who are having treatment by Valerie Sinerson will produce stories that echo such topical issues as the recent trial for receiving internet pornography and the publicity for the film Hannibal. There is good research that shows the memories of the abuse victims are produced in and by the therapy."
Could you start again, please? What's that when it's flashing? What does it mean when it's flashing?
It's still going.
It wasn't flashing before. Start again. Tell me more stuff. Tell me about this cult that you're in.
This cult is because the first time whenever we ever done it,
Did what? First
like
time?
first ever we saw Papa kill a baby, and me and Gabriel done. Then when they done sex to me and Gabriel.
Who did sex to you?
Papa, the others, when we just came
Who were
to
the
school.
others? Who were the others?
Mr. Hollings, Mrs. Force, all the parents and the teachers and Papa.
Can you give me the names of some of these parents and teachers, please?
Laura, Sophie, Sophie's mom, yes, Sophie.
Laura who? Who's Laura?
Laura Herlicker,
Give me their surnames if you can remember.
Laura Herlicker, Sophie Dix, Jackie Cowell,
Who are the leaders of this cult?
Papa.
And who is
Papa.
Papa? Who is Papa?
Papa is my dad. He's Ricky. His name is Ricky Dearman, and he does really. He's the boss
Of what?
of the whole thing.
Of the what? Boss of what?
Of the whole cult. The whole Peter Bowl ring.
And what do they do in this cult?
They do sex there. They kill babies.
Sex to who?
They do sex to children. They do it to each other.
And what are the babies for? What do you get the
The
babies?
babies, we send the social services to do it, unfortunately. They get the babies from families who can't look after the baby and who don't want the baby.
Really?
Yes.
Social services, I find that difficult to believe.
Yes.
What's their name?
Richie.
Richie
Ella.
who? Richie who?
Richie, I don't know his surname, but it's Richie. His
The
name
ones
is...
who came to our house. And who was
He's
telling
your
us that-
particular social, he's your social services, he's your worker that helps.
Yes, and Ella, the other lady who
Polish
first time...
one, Polish.
Yes, she came to...
The removal of fingers and hands is common in many rituals in paganism, black magic, witchcraft and Satanism. The question is, why did Fred West remove the hands, fingers, toes and kneecaps from his victims? Was this just for keepsake? Many psychopathic killers hold on to keepsakes, something to remember their victims by. Dexter was an American TV show that ran from 2006 to 2013. It followed the life of a psychopathic killer, Dexter, a man that was traumatized as a young boy after witnessing the death of his mother. Dexter was manipulated by a man that adopted him after he realised that Dexter was a psychopath. He was trained to only kill people that kill people, but like many real serial killers, he collected keepsakes from his victims. In Dexter's case, he collected a small sample of blood from every victim. Despite a huge search of the now famous 25 Cromwell Street, which involved digging up the garden and floor in the cellar, and the eventual destruction of the house, police never found any of the missing bones, which suggests that Fred West and Rose West did not have the bones in their possession. Journalist Jeffrey Wansell wrote Fred West's official biography, An Evil Love, in 1996. It included one passage that alluded to Rose West's fascination with black magic and the occult, an interest shared by one of her victims, Nanny Linda Goff. The section reads, after her arrest, the police suggested to Rosemary West that she had become fascinated by Linda Goff's interest in black magic and Satanism, which led them to want to torture and humiliate their victims as part of a ritual in which other people who shared their views participated. Was Fred and Rose West influenced by the occult as some researchers suggest? Were they Satanists? Did the police and media hide and continue to hide important information about the West murders? If so, then why? Who are Fred and Rose West? Frederick Walter Stephen West was born on the 29th of September 1941 in Much Mercle, Herefordshire, England. Shortly after turning 17, Fred West was involved in a motorcycle accident in which he suffered a fractured skull, a broken arm, and a broken leg in the incident. He was unconscious for 7 days and walked with braces for several months following the incident. In 1961, he admitted raping and impregnating his 13-year-old sister. When arrested, he openly admitted the charges against him and even asked, "Doesn't everybody do it?" His sister Kitty refused to give evidence against him in court and the case collapsed. Fred married Catherine Bernadette Costello, also known as Rena, whom he met in a Much Mercle dance hall in 1960. On the 4th of November 1965, while living in Glasgow and earning money as an ice cream man, Fred West killed a young boy he hit while driving his van. The police believed that the incident was an accident, and Fred was cleared of any wrongdoing, but fearing an angry reaction from the locals whom he relied on to make a living from, Fred moved to Gloucester. To escape Fred West's domestic abuse and increasingly sadistic sexual demands, Rena asked her friend John McLachlan to rescue her. They devised a plan. John McLachlan and a man named John Trotter, who was Isa McNeil's boyfriend, were to secretly drive to Bishop's Cleeve in McLachlan's Mini and discreetly take Rena and her children and Isa McNeil back to Scotland. In February 1966, Rena joined Fred in the Timberland Caravan Park in Bishop's Cleeve, Gloucestershire. Rena was not alone. She was accompanied by Isa McNeil and Anne McFall, who also moved into Fred's caravan. McNeil and McFall both came from impoverished backgrounds and hoped to find work in England. Anne McFall and Fred began an affair. It is believed that Anne McFall informed Fred of Rena's plan to escape, as Fred turned up at the meeting place that Rena and John had arranged. In July 1967, Anne McClure was aged 18 and 8 months pregnant with Fred West's child when she vanished. She was never reported missing, but her dismembered remains were found buried at the edge of a cornfield between Much Merkel and Kimpley in 1994. Her limbs had been carefully disarticulated, and like all Fred West victims, she had fingers missing, and according to some reports, her unborn child was cut from her womb. In 1969, Fred met 15-year-old Rosemary Letts, who he later married. Rosemary Pauline Letts was born on the 29th of November 1953 in Northam, Devon, England. From the age of 10, Rosemary Letts was repeatedly raped by her father, who suffered with paranoid schizophrenia and was prone to extreme violence. Her mother suffered from depression and was given electroconvulsive therapy, formerly known as electroshock therapy, while pregnant. Some have argued that this treatment may have caused paternal injuries to her daughter. Rose West came from a family where incest was normal. She had a sexual relationship with her little brother Graham and her father, which continued even after she married Fred West. Together, Fred and Rose would turn their new home, 25 Cromwell Street, into a real-life house of horrors. The house has now been destroyed, and in its place is a public footpath. Fred West is thought to have killed at least 12 women. Most police officers and researchers suggest the number is probably much higher. Fred West himself admitted that there were more and offered to disclose the location of one victim per year for 20 years. Fred initially admitted to all of the murders and claimed that Rose played no part at all and had no knowledge of any of them. He even admitted to one that he could not have possibly committed, as he was in prison at the time. 17-year-old Rose West is thought to have single-handedly murdered 8-year-old Charmaine West, sometime between the 15th and 23rd of June 1971. After Charmaine's death, Charmaine's friend Tracy Giles visited the Wests and asked to play with Charmaine. Rose responded by stating that Charmaine had moved away with her birth mother. Fred buried her body after his release on the 24th of June. When Charmaine's mother, Rena, tried to retrieve her daughter, Fred killed her as well. Beginning in the early 1970s, Rose regularly worked as a prostitute, often while her husband watched. They even forced their own children to work. Anna Marie was forced to prostitute herself within the household. Fred and Rose West built a bar to cater for Rose's clients that included local police officers, though an official inquiry later failed to expose which police officers were attending and even denied police were using the brothel at all, despite eyewitness reports that some police officers were using the brothel. The Wests were running a brothel that supplied children to customers. Who were these customers? On the 27th of September 1996, The Independent reported, Sir Nicholas Lyle called on newspapers to show greater restraint in paying for background material about high-profile court cases. Sir Nicholas said, by signing a contract with a newspaper, a witness may have incentive to exaggerate. His warning came as the Police Complaints Authority cleared Gloucester Police over claims that officers had used the house of serial killers Fred and Rose West as a brothel and a drinking club. The complaint arose out of a claim by Mrs. Sharon Compton, a friend of Alison Chambers, a victim of the Wests. Reported in the Daily Express last November that police regularly visited the house in Cromwell Street. When torture and murder were secretly buried in the cellar. The PCA said it could find no evidence to support the allegation made by the mother of two, who is now in her 30s. Gloucestershire's Deputy Chief Constable, Mr. Nigel Burgess, said talks were being held in the Crown Prosecution Service on a possible action against Mrs. Compton over information she gave to the Cromwell Street Inquiry Team and to the PCA investigation. Gloucestershire Police do not seem to take kindly when it comes to facing questioning about their involvement in the West murders, but Sharon Compton is not the only person to suggest that police and Fred West seem to have a very comfortable relationship. In September 2014, the Express reported that Janet Bates said her late husband Terry Crick was racked with guilt when police took no action against the Wests, who went on to kill 12 people. She believes his death was due to a campaign by West Mercia and Gloucestershire Police, who she claims failed to act because Fred West was a police informant and officers used the brothel at their home. Her late husband had reported the Wests in 1970 after he showed in gruesome images of body parts and surgical instruments, which Fred West said he used for illegal abortions. She said Terry had been shown disturbing images and went straight to the police, but they didn't do anything about it and he felt responsible. He thought if he had been a more upstanding person at the time, the police would have listened to him. Miss Bates said Terry asked how many girls he could have saved if they would have listened to him. He blamed himself and could not handle the pressure. She alerted the Independent Police Complaints Commission in May this year, claiming her late husband was bullied and harassed as part of a cover-up by officials involved in the Wests. The allegations are still under investigation. She said, "We believe Terry is dead because of the way senior police misused their powers. I did not pursue it, as I was afraid that what happened to Terry would happen to me. I had 2 young children at the time, but now they are older and they want this mistake to be acknowledged. This is for them." The bar in 25 Cromwell Street was called the Black Magic Bar. Rosemary West is known to have been fascinated with the occult. Some investigators of the West murders believe that Fred may have been supplying a local coven sacrificial victims and disposing of their bodies. Despite confessing to all the murders at the time, Fred West would later change his story and admitted to journalists and police that other people were involved. He later denied murdering any of the women found under his house, and for at least one of these murders, he could prove his innocence. It is true that Fred West changed his story on multiple times, and not everything he says was reliable, but Charmaine West is not the only victim that Fred West probably didn't kill. According to Fred, a lodger at 25 Cromwell Street by the name of Linda Goff that introduced Rose to the occult was killed by Rose. Fred told police Rose murdered her because she fancied her, but no explanation of the missing bones was given. When Linda's parents visited Cromwell Street in an attempt to contact their daughter, Rose told them that Linda had left. Linda's parents noticed that Rose was wearing Linda's clothes. They contacted the police, but unfortunately, no action was taken. Another murder that Fred claimed Rosemary committed was that of Shirley Robinson. Fred confided in his appropriate adult Janet Leach that Rose murdered Robinson and had assisted in her dismemberment, personally removing Robinson's fetus from the womb in the process. On Friday the 13th of May 1994, Fred West would give his final of 132 police interviews that resulted in Fred West being charged for 12 murders. Once in jail and awaiting his trial, Fred West changed his story. He claimed that the women were tortured and killed at sadistic parties near Bristol and ordered his solicitor to prepare a defence based on this. His legal team advised him to refuse any further interviews. Unfortunately, Fred West died before he got to court. On the 1st of January 1995, Fred West was found hanged in an apparent suicide despite being on suicide watch. Was Fred West telling the truth? Were there other people involved in the West murders? Some people have argued that for many years social services overlooked the Wests, and the same has been reported about the police.
Remains of 3 women in the garden. A builder, Frederick West, has been charged with their murders. Detectives say there's a distinct possibility there may be more bodies.
The first day of drilling inside the house, and another grim find for detectives. What they suspect is 2 further bodies under a concrete floor. And tonight, a chilling prediction from the man leading the investigation.
I have reason to believe that there may be other remains in the area, but I am not in this position at this time to explain that further.
The latest remains haven't yet been identified, but relatives of 2 missing people from Gloucestershire have been told about what the search team has unearthed. Specialist radar equipment has allowed police to look into walls and under the foundations, pinpointing objects hidden behind stone or bricks. The house owner, Frederick West, is accused of murdering the 3 women whose bodies were found in his back garden. Mr. West is due to appear before Gloucester magistrates on Monday. Excavation work at his house will continue through the weekend. In a few days, police say they'll start to demolish a single-storey extension at the back of the house. They also revealed tonight they intend to search 2 other addresses in the area. Not, though, until they finish taking 25 Cromwell Street apart, piece by piece. Steve Scott, ITN, Gloucester.
Irish author Jim Kearns says new evidence shows that the pair may have been involved in part of a Midland black magic ring. Jim Kearns has previously exposed a satanic sect operating in Kilkenny, which he claimed had been responsible for the disappearance of a number of young people. He also wrote a book, Disappeared Off the Face of the Earth, about his first-hand experience of witches and covens in Northern Ireland. He explains, myself and others believe there is a definite occult or satanic connection to the West murders. The murders reek of human sacrifice with powerful connections. The Wests have got all the essential ingredients of ritual killers, their indifference to the suffering of the victims, the murder of their own children and burying the bodies under their own house. The fact that all the victims had fingers and toes missing, and that the bar they built to entertain Rose West's clients was called the Black Magic Bar, just underlines the point. At first, it was thought that the name of the bar was a reference to prostitute Rose's preference to having sex with black men. But Mr. Carnes thinks it refers to something more sinister. It can't be a coincidence, he says, and the Wests wouldn't be the first serial killers to have satanic connections. I have no doubt that the likes of Jack the Ripper and Myra Hindley were involved in something similar. Their killing patterns and behaviour reek of the occult too. He believes Fred committed suicide in 1995 after being threatened by high-ranking members of the Coven who feared exposure. His brother, who was himself suspected of being involved in the murders, also later killed himself before getting to court. Jim Carnes continues, "It can hardly be coincidence that Fred and his brother both committed suicide before they had their day in open court and a chance to tell their stories. My belief is that Fred was covering up for people in the Coven who did not want their story to come to light. In my experience, members of satanic cults often come from the professional classes who would do anything to protect their reputation. There are also numerous rumours online connecting Fred West to Freemasonry. Despite hours of research, I could not find a definitive answer to if Fred West was a Mason or not. I did call the Grand Lodge and ask. They claim that they don't know." Jim Carnes and other researchers believe the West murders were murders committed by a Coven that almost definitely still exist and function in the Gloucestershire, Worcestershire and Herefordshire area of the United Kingdom. The Wests were not part of the so-called professional classes that the occultist expert Margaret Murray connects to the covens of Satanists, occultists and witches, and therefore were probably not members themselves, but they could have been a supplier or a disposer of the victims to this coven of powerful rich people. Could it be possible that a rich and powerful satanic cult still operates in the United Kingdom today? Considering the history of the United Kingdom and the occult, it is not only possible, but it is more probable that powerful secret societies of Satanists, witches and occultists still operate in the United Kingdom. What's worse is they could be much more common and powerful than most people believe. Jimmy Savile has been reported by one witness, who was 12 at the time, to have performed a satanic ritual in a basement of Stoke Mandeville Hospital. The ritual involved her being raped and beaten, as well as terrified, as she claims the attackers chanted Ave Satanas during the attack. The witness also claims that though Jimmy Savile was not the leader of the group, he was still seen as a very important person. She is not the only person to have claimed to witnessed Jimmy Savile take part in a satanic ritual. Jimmy Savile has been photographed numerous times wearing robes. He was a powerful man with powerful connections in the British and Israeli governments and the media, the hierarchy and monarchy. He was even put in charge of Broadmoor, an high-security psychiatric hospital at Crowthorne in Berkshire, England. The media keep calling Jimmy Savile a child abuser, but there is sufficient evidence to suggest he could have been something even worse. He was speaking in 2002 after a Louis Theroux documentary in which he was secretly filmed boasting about his criminal past as a Leeds nightclub proprietor. Speaking in a follow-up documentary, he said of Theroux, "He was having a go to try to get a bit of Sally's TV, so I drop into Godfather mode. If he wants to die, he can die. He won't be the first I've put away." Leading criminologist Dr. Ian Stephen urged police to consider investigating Savile as a suspect in cold case murders and missing persons inquiries. He says it is possible that he upped his game. Always a risk with sensation seekers. He was also a witness to drag away a girl from Rowcliffe Manor Children's Home near Leicester by a person that claims to be a former victim of Savile, who is now a police informant. The next day, a matron informed him that the girl, whose name was either April or Elizabeth, had died. NHS Trust said they failed to find evidence that Jimmy Savile had ever visited the children's home. Peter William Sutcliffe is a serial killer who was given the nickname the Yorkshire Ripper by the press. In 1981, Sutcliffe was convicted of murdering 13 women and attempting to murder 7 others. Before Peter Sutcliffe was arrested and eventually convicted of the murders, West Yorkshire police suspected and even interviewed Jimmy Savile about the murders. Jimmy Savile would later become close friends with Peter Sutcliffe, who began his sentence at HMP Parkhurst on the 22nd of May 1981. Despite being found sane at his trial, he was later diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia. While at Parkhurst, Peter Sutcliffe was assaulted by James Costello, a 35-year-old career criminal with several convictions for violence. On the 10th of January 1983, he followed Sutcliffe into recess of the F2 hospital wing at Parkhurst Prison. He plunged a broken coffee jar into the left side of Sutcliffe's face, creating 4 wounds that required 30 stitches. In March 1984, Sutcliffe was sent to Broadmoor under Section 47 of the Mental Health Act of 1983, an act that was brought in at a very convenient time for Peter Sutcliffe. Jimmy Savile has also been accused of being involved or even ordering the assassination of Jill Dando, who, according to close friends and media reports, was ready to expose a powerful paedophile ring that run through the BBC. At the time of the West murders at Cromwell Street, Jimmy Savile was witnessed abusing boys at a former care home in Whitminster, no more than 8 miles away from Cromwell Street. Though police cannot confirm that Jimmy Savile ever visited the care home, there have been sketchy witness reports claiming he had. Parkland's Children's Home in Whitminster opened in the 1950s and closed in 2002. The witness was only 10 at the time and referred to as Ruth in a report to protect her identity. The report states, It has not been possible to find any recorded evidence to confirm Jimmy Savile or any other celebrity had access to children and young people at Parklands during the period of the time relevant to the alleged incidents. Her memories have caused her distress and she was provided with appropriate support. The investigation found there is no evidence to confirm that incidents occurred the way that Ruth described, but could not conclude that it definitely did or did not happen, or if it involved Jimmy Savile. Gloucestershire Police, along with at least 6 other police forces, are also investigating reports of abuse and murder involving ex-British Prime Minister and Conservative Party leader Sir Edward Heath. Sir Edward Richard George Heath, also known as Ted Heath, was a British politician who served as Prime Minister of the United Kingdom from 1970 to 1974 and leader of the Conservative Party from 1965 to 1975. Heath governed during a bloody period in the history of the Northern Ireland Troubles. On Bloody Sunday 1972, 14 men were shot dead by British soldiers during an anti-internment march in Derry City. In January 2003, Ted Heath gave evidence to the Savile inquiry and stated that he had never sanctioned unlawful lethal force in Northern Ireland. Heath has faced many allegations of sexual abuse, rape and murder. He has also been connected to Satanism numerous times. A group of women claimed that in 1989 they informed the police that Edward Heath was a Satanist performing rituals in woodlands in South England. Unfortunately, the police dismissed the claims at the time. On the 20th of February 2017, the Daily Mail wrote an article about the allegations. The article attempts to dismiss the claims as lies and fantasy and moans about the taxpayers' money the investigation has cost so far, as it does with other articles written about Edward Heath and historical sex abuse. It reads, a group of women who say Sir Edward Heath abused them as children have also accused their parents of being involved in up to 16 murders. The farce came as the police probed incredible claims that the former Prime Minister was linked to a paedophile ring that killed as many as 16 children, which would make them the worst child murderers in British history. The seemingly far-fetched allegations have been made by a family who allege the politician was part of a satanic sex cult that was run by their own parents. They say that the cult regularly slaughtered children as ritual sacrifices in churches and forests around southern Britain, and also participated in similar ceremonies in Africa. They claim their mother and father, who is said to have known the former Conservative leader, were responsible for slaughtering children ranging from babies to teenagers, yet they evaded justice. The paedophile ring, which they say Sir Edward Heath was a part of, stabbed, tortured and maimed youngsters in churches and burnt babies in satanic orgies before men, women and children gorged themselves on blood and body parts, police have been told. If the bizarre allegations were proved, the parents who allegedly led the killings would be responsible for murdering more children than Fred and Rose West. They would also be on par with Thomas Hamilton, who shot dead 16 children in the 1996 Dunblane massacre. The women's lurid tales were dismissed by the police in 1989 when they came forward. Sir Edward's name was never mentioned to the police at the time. It was only last year that he was named for the first time after one of the claimants said she remembered a man called Ed was a prime mover in the network of paedophile abusers. There is no suggestion that Sir Edward Heath killed any children himself in the women's accounts. Wiltshire Police have spent more than a year investigating the allegations as part of an inquiry that cost the taxpayers over £883,000, and it relatively tarnished the reputation of the unmarried politician who died in 2005, aged 89. Last night, Sir Edward's godson, Lincoln Seligman, said, "I understand that these claims from the 1980s were dismissed as complete fantasy by the police. It is disappointing that these wild allegations have been reheated and randomly attached to Sir Edward's name." A Wiltshire Police spokesman said, "We are not prepared to discuss this, as this is an ongoing investigation." The godson of Sir Edward Heath reacted angrily after it was claimed that a police chief is 120% sure that the sex abuse allegations against the former Prime Minister are genuine. Wiltshire Chief Police Constable Michael Vill was reported to believe the child abuse allegations against the late politician, which include lurid tales of satanic child slaughter, are totally convincing. Mr. Vill, whose force have been investigating the claims for 18 months, is also said to believe that Sir Edward was a paedophile whose crimes were covered up. The police have established that, contrary to claims that Sir Edward could not have committed the crimes because he never drove a car and always had a police driver with him. He did drive and once had a car, but the claims have infuriated Sir Edward's godson, who dismissed it as a PR hustle of some sort by the Wiltshire Force ahead of an official report of the investigation. Lincoln Seligman, who has described the probe as a witch hunt, has questioned how police can say the allegations are true just on the basis that he may have driven a car. Yesterday, Mr. Vill said, "The legal role of a police servant is to, on behalf of the public, impartially investigate allegations without fear or favour, and go where the evidence takes us." In January 2018, the BBC reported that Chief Constable of Wiltshire Police Michael Vill was to step down. His contract was due to expire this summer, but is not being renewed by the Police and Crime Commissioner PCC Angus McPherson. Mr. Vill is the preferred candidate of Cleveland PCC Barry Coppinger for new Chief Constable of Cleveland Police. He recently faced criticism over his handling of the accusations of historical sex abuse against former Prime Minister Sir Edward Heath. He insisted Operation Conifer was not a witch hunt and said Sir Edward would have been questioned over sex abuse claims if he was alive when they came to light. Operation Conifer, which spanned 14 UK police forces, said a total of 42 claims related to 40 different individuals with alleged offences from 1956 to 1992, while Sir Edward was an elected MP. Sir Edward's godson, Lincoln Seligman, said he believed that the investigation was flawed and that his former private secretary, Michael McManus, who wrote a biography about him, said he did not believe there was any evidence of wrongdoing. Could Jimmy Savile and Edward Heath have had something to do with the coven that Jimmy Carnes claims operate throughout the Herefordshire and Gloucestershire and continue to operate to this day? One thing is definite: Gloucestershire was a dangerous place to be throughout the 1960s, 70s and 80s. Or is barrister Barbara Hewson right when she claims satanic ritual abuse does not exist? It's like alien abduction. Channel 4 reporter Mr. Guru Murphy asked her, "Are you saying that people have made these allegations up?" To which she responded, "I would think so. They have made allegations, but that is not evidence. What I am saying is it's pointless to conduct an investigation of this kind into somebody who is dead, as they can't answer. You can't actually do anything if the person accused is dead, because he's not around to be questioned, he's not around to be charged, he's not around to defend himself in any way," she explains.
Maybe bought the babies I had.
It would be hard to imagine more misery and suffering than what Teresa says she's had to endure.
And us kids would be made to do things with the adults and the animals, and then a sacrifice would happen.
The sacrifice, were these animal sacrifices?
Animals and people.
On what scale do you think this was happening?
Enormous, far beyond what we've ever heard of here before.
Teresa's mother, Bridget.
You're talking about mass murder?
Yes, on a scale that this country's never heard of before. Like the old people's homes now, only these are...
For the first time, Teresa is learning what it's like to live with love instead of fear.
Pretty low.
In this quiet English village, with the help of her mother, she's slowly repairing her broken life. Teresa is now 15, but at the age of 2, she was left in the care of this woman, the grandma she called Nan. And that, she says, is when her torment started.
Who was the leader? Who was the boss of the gang, of the cult?
At home it was my Nan.
Your Nan made you have sex with animals?
Yeah. Like goats and donkeys.
The story of Teresa is a story almost too horrible to recount. A case of child abuse that goes well beyond the kind of things we normally associate with the abuse of children. In 27 years of reporting, it has to be one of the most painful stories I have ever had to tell.
How many men or how many people would have sex with you?
What, at one time?
Yes.
About everyone who was there, which must have been about 20. You know, from 10 to 20 people. If it was a big ceremony, it used to be 30.
What would your grandma be doing when these men were forcing themselves on you?
Usually laughing. Or smiling. Or having sex with another man. Or other men.
A chronicle of debauchery and depravity so horrific it's hard to believe. You have to ask yourself, could Teresa be just making it up?
No. I know what's true and what's not. No, I know what I saw.
Children don't make up elaborate lies that this would have to be if it was a lie, which I know it is not. It isn't.
This couldn't be a terrible dream, a nightmare that you're reliving?
No. It's no dream. It's a nightmare, but it's not one you can wake up from. It's there all the time.
This really happened? You're quite sure of that?
Yeah.
The police don't think Teresa made up a story. Some of the cult members are to stand trial. 5 men have been charged with rape. As for Nan, the grandmother, she's 61 and lives in this council flat in South London. She's charged on 7 counts of aiding and abetting rape and 2 counts of performing abortions on Teresa. If you're finding this hard to believe, so did I at first. But then there are the medical reports, evidence of sustained sexual abuse. And there's this, a statement prepared for 60 Minutes by Teresa's psychiatrist. It says, "In my opinion, Teresa's account is not the product of a psychotic illness, nor the figment of a fertile imagination. I believe her to be telling the truth."
That killing the people made him happy.
Sacrifices to please the devil. According to Teresa, the worst rituals took place at a house somewhere in the country.
It was big, you know, expensive. From the front it looked like a castle. You know, it had a long drive and big double wooden doors.
Do you think they were rich people then?
Very rich.
Before Edward Heath, there was Harold Wilson. He was a British Labour politician who served as Prime Minister of the United Kingdom from 1964 to 1970 and from 1974 to 1976. Before Edward Heath, there is Baron Boothby and Tom Dryberg. Apart from being homosexuals with links to the crazed paedophile network, they were also rumoured to be Satanists. Both were involved in behind-the-scenes organising for Harold Wilson and Edward Heath to become Prime Ministers of Britain, and Harold Wilson was an eye initiate of the left-hand path, together with Nat Rothschild. The Moors murders were carried out by Ian Brady and Moira Hindley between July 1963 and October 1965 in and around Manchester, England. Ian Brady was born in Glasgow as Ian Duncan Stewart on the 2nd of January 1938 to Margaret Peggy Stewart, an unmarried tea-room waitress. His father remains unknown, though his mum claims he was a reporter that died 3 months before Ian Brady was born. His mother had no support and was not capable of looking after him, so he ended up in the care of Mary and John Sloan, a local couple with 4 children of their own. Brady took their name and became known as Ian Sloan. Erica Gregory, who has devoted years of her life investigating the Moors murders, believes Ian Brady and Moira Hindley formed a paedophile ring. Before their arrest in 1965, Savile run the BBC studios from Manchester's Dickinson Road, where Top of the Pops was filmed, and has been accused of meeting with Brady and Hindley to buy indecent images of children. Speaking exclusively to the Daily Star online, she said, "I believe they went to the BBC studio regularly to make a fuss and to try to get with Savile." Alongside David Smith, Brady was selling photographs of children to make money at this time. I believe Savile could have been one of his customers. It is well known that Savile visited them both inside. I believe they were in a ring of some sort. Erica Gregory also believes that Jimmy Savile used to send messages to them through the radio channel he was a DJ on. Jimmy Savile could have been using his radio for secret messages, she said. Brady used music in tapes and songs that he stated reminded him of the Moors. And Savile knew that if he played a song at a certain time, then those listening would get the message, she added. Myra Hindley was born in Crumsall on 23rd of July 1942. She was beaten as a child by her father, Bob Hindley, who served with the Parachute Regiment and had been sanctioned in North Africa, Cyprus and Italy during the Second World War. He had been known in the army as an hard man, and he expected his daughter to be equally as tough. He taught her how to fight and insisted that she stick up for herself. When Hindley was 8, a local boy approached her in the street and scratched both of her cheeks with his fingernails, drawing blood. She burst into tears and ran into her parents' house to be met by her father, who demanded that she go and punch him, because if you don't, I'll levy you. Hindley found the boy and succeeded in knocking him down with a sequence of punches, as her father had taught her. Myra Hindley and Ian Brady were jailed for the murder of 5 children, though it is thought they probably killed more. The victims were aged between 10 and 17 years old. Jimmy Savile was not the only powerful friend of the Moors murderers. Myra Hindley was befriended by Lord David Astor, a former editor of The Observer. Lord Astor took up Hindley's case in 1982. She had been in prison for more than 15 years at the time. She was also visited by Lord Longford, the first of these visits taking place at Holloway Prison in the autumn of 1968. Avika Gregory claims Myra took the role of the persecuted women in history, while Brady was taking the role of the alchemist. They even found books on witchcraft in their house when police arrested them. We have found evidence they were doing rituals on the moors. We've seen knotted ropes, hair and sheep bones with evidence of large fires lit around oak trees. Avika believes the murderous pair planned their killings on dates that were important to the occult calendar. The murders were separated by 4 months. I believe Brady chose dates and times for his rituals, she added. Myra would later claim, "He became my god, my idol, my object of worship. I worshipped him blindly." She claimed Brady spiked her drink, took pornographic pictures, and then blackmailed her into committing the crimes. Despite her powerful connections, Myra Hindley died in prison on the 15th of November 2002, or so we're told. There is a rumour circulating around the internet that reads, "A primary school nurse was driving through a country lane about 6 weeks after Myra Hindley's supposedly pronounced death. It was night time and the nurse's car was suddenly hit in the back by another vehicle. The woman driver who hit her got out of her car and came to talk to the nurse. The nurse looked carefully and recognised the woman as Myra Hindley and says, 'Oh my God, you're Myra Hindley.' The woman burst into tears and replied, 'You can't say that, you can't say that,' and drove off hurriedly. The nurse, however, noted the registration number of the car and upon returning home called the police. She recounted what had happened, telling them that it was Myra Hindley at the wheel of the other car. The police visited the nurse the following day, but rather than assist her with noting an accident, they scared and intimidated her. They asked her to withdraw the accident claim and report and suggested instead that the accident had never happened. The primary school nurse was just a normal, law-abiding person, and by now she was very scared, although still certain of her facts. That even though Myra Hindley was believed by the world to be dead, it had been her driving the car that hit her. Regardless of her story, the police continued to intimidate the nurse, and she was frightened into taking any further action. However, unknown to the police, a nurse had also reported the incident to a friend of the family, who had in turn passed it to a local school friend, who was a local journalist. The journalist took the story to a major tabloid newspaper, who were at first very interested, but the following day told his fellow journalist that the story of Inley being alive had to be buried. Despite this, within a day or so, orders from the top were given to publish the story on how the ashes of Moira Inley had been found. Ian Brady claims his connections included the Crays, the Richardson Gang and the Great Train Robbers, as well as obviously Jimmy Savile. He passed judgment on politicians that had considered his case over the years, praising Labour's Roy Jenkins as the greatest Home Secretary ever, and claimed to have once discussed Russian literature with James Callaghan. Ian Brady was particularly scornful of Tony Blair, who he accused of getting rich off his war crimes in Iraq, whilst claiming he was effectively a political prisoner after Margaret Thatcher had intervened in his case. He said that Britain was a psychopathic country that had been invading other nations for 300 years. While this is a fact, it does not in any shape or form make it alright to commit the crimes that he committed. How did Moira Inley and Ian Brady get to know so many powerful people? Was it through everyday life, or were they connected in some other way? Did Moira Inley's secret connections help her to get a secret release and a new identity, or could the Moira Inley sighting have been nothing more than a case of misidentification? If these allegations of ritualistic satanic abuse are real and were so common throughout the ancient and modern day history of Britain, it is very likely that the abuse continues to take place to this day. According to many witnesses and experts, these dark cults that practice human sacrifice usually consist of upper middle classes, sometimes called the professional classes and the upper classes. The rituals usually take place in rural Britain. Ancient pagan landmarks are preferred but not essential, as they are located on ley lines. Like Christianity, Judaism and Islam, there are many different sections of Satanism and Satanists, and even more sections based on paganism, witchcraft and Wiccan traditions. Not all Satanists perform human sacrifice. Some sections even mock the suggestion that Satanists do. A modern day Satanist can be anything from an attention-seeking teenager that has had their mind warped by questionable role models to the more traditional, stereotypical and sometimes a highly respected member of society. Despite denials and a mainstream media blackout of information, there is still evidence that satanic cults made up of upper middle classes and the upper classes do still exist and operate in the United Kingdom and around the world. Many reporters felt that social services were very slow to act in the case of the West murders. The case was being treated incompetently at best. Despite Fred West's history of sex crimes, a missing daughter and stepdaughter and ex-wife, the Wests went unnoticed for years. On the 30th of September 2015, the Evening Standard reported a story involving false memories of Conservative politicians performing satanic ritual abuse. The full story claims a nurse died after claiming she had been sexually abused by a satanic cult, an inquest heard. Carol Myers, 41, claimed her family were part of a cult that abused her before alleging that her mother had murdered her sister and set fire to their house to hide the evidence. But a police investigation found the disturbing allegations were unsubstantiated, and her family believe they were false memories dreamt up during controversial recovered memory therapy sessions. The brother of Miss Myers, who was born Carol Felstead but changed her name, said the claims were a myth. Kevin Felstead told Westminster Coroner's Court that her family fiercely contested the allegations. Addressing the court, Mr. Felstead said, "I just want to ask that the court acknowledges that Carol developed false memories. She had treatment and memories that were false and demonstrably not true." Coroner Fiona Walcott said she could not rule out that Miss Myers had suffered from false memories, but she acknowledged that the extreme allegations that were made of satanic sexual abuse and murder were investigated and found to be absolutely unsubstantiated. Miss Myers was found by police dead and next to tabloids on her bed in her flat in Wandsworth, South London, on the 29th of June 2005. She had suffered from post-traumatic stress style flashbacks and had been receiving counselling since 1985, when she contacted the Samaritans, the court heard. Over the course of the next 2 decades, she made disturbing allegations accusing her family of abuse. But her family blame her memories on her counselling sessions, claiming that she went to a doctor with an headache and that set in motion a chain of events that led to the extreme allegations. Just weeks before her death in June 2005, she contacted her brother Richard out of the blue and said she was lonely and talked of moving back to Stockport to be near her family, who she promised to visit the following week. But she never did. Richard wrote his sister a letter on the 29th of June, the same day that she was found dead. Police were called to Miss Myers' home by Flora Fisher, a therapist and friend, who said she called 999 while on a train after not being able to get hold of her for 3 days. She told police Miss Myers may have overdosed and she was likely to be in her bathroom. Asked why she said this, Miss Fisher said she was worried because she could not contact her, and I knew that she had often had to struggle against suicidal feelings. She said Miss Myers struggled with her mental health over many years. She took an overdose in 1992, had self-harmed and had flashbacks of some kind of earlier experience. The coroner returned an open verdict as the cause of Miss Myers' death. Speaking after the inquest, Mr. Felstead said his sister had been given therapy that would shame a medieval quack and ended up in an horrific condition. He placed blame for her disturbing accusations of abuse with therapists who counselled her. He said she was regressed and hypnotised. She came to believe that her family were leaders of a satanic cult responsible for mass murder. It included members of Parliament, including 2 former members of Margaret Thatcher's cabinet. My mother was said to have murdered a baby and burnt down the house to hide it. Once Carol injured her shoulder by falling down some stairs, but recorded in the psychotherapist's notes that the injury was a result of being suspended in chains from satanic ritual abuse. He said there was always a perfectly normal explanation, but claimed that his sister's wild claims went unchallenged by her therapists. And while the Felstead family may never know the exact cause of Miss Myers' death, they hope her case will be a warning to other families enduring similar accusations and that lessons are learnt. Did Carol Myers really suffer from false memories, or is there something more sinister to this story? How well were the accusations of satanic abuse investigated, and were they taken seriously? Can it be nothing more than a coincidence that Carol Myers has the same false memories as many other witnesses to satanic abuse, or did her therapist implant the false memory as suggested by her family and the courts? The Daily Mail compare their case to the case of Maxine Berry. They write, Maxine Berry is thankful her father was just as forgiving when she retracted the false accusations that he had abused her as a child. A senior clinical trial assistant from Leeds, she was 18 when she went to see a student counsellor after suffering with stress about starting university. The counsellor referred me to a private clinic which, unbeknown to me, specialised in recovered memory techniques, says Maxine. I was given a book about childhood abuse and invited into group therapy sessions. Finally, in one session, I said, well, perhaps my father did do something to me in the past, and it just spiralled from there. I was daubed with a cocktail of antidepressants, and gradually my stories became wilder. I claimed I was abused by my father from the ages of 2 to 10, but my dad, Gary, a writer, split up with my mother when I was 3 and moved away. I hadn't actually seen him since. I was told I was bound to become an abuser too, so I had myself sterilised. Our group counselling sessions became like a competition, with everyone trying to outdo each other with a worse story than the person before. One therapist became really angry when I started to question if these things had really happened, telling me, "You are not accepting things." My claim started with inappropriate touching and spiralled until I truly believed he had raped me. I was so unhappy I attempted suicide several times. It was my husband, Brian, who finally said I sounded as if I was reading from a script. Our marriage had suffered because of the therapy too. We married when I was 22, but separated within a year because I wouldn't listen to him. Therapy had taken over my whole life. Thankfully, we reconciled the following year. But when I told the therapists we wanted children, they were horrified, telling me I would probably abuse them in turn because I had been so damaged. I was so worried that I had a sterilisation when I was 23, denying me of the chance of having my own family. It was only as Brian helped me come off the medication that my head started to clear. Later in the year, we saw a TV documentary about recovered false memories, and I realised that this is what happened to me. Maxine began legal action against the clinic, but they settled out of court. Afterwards, she made contact with her father Gary for the first time in 20 years. I'm so angry that therapists played with the mind of a vulnerable girl. It almost destroyed my family and nearly killed me. I managed to walk up to my father's front door and say sorry, but it took all the courage I had to admit I'd been wrong. Satanic ritual abuse and allegations of satanic ritual abuse date back thousands of years. Many of the world's ancient cultures performed human sacrifice and killed the innocent, usually to please spirits. Occultic writings explain human sacrifice. In chapter 12 of Magic in Theory and Practice by Aleister Crowley, he claims, "It would be unwise to condemn as irrational the practice of those savages who tear the heart and liver from the adversary and devour them while yet warm. In any case, it was the theory of the ancient magicians that any living being was a storehouse of energy, varying in quantity according to the size and health of the animal, and in quality according to its mental and moral character. At the death of the animal, this energy is liberated suddenly. The animal should therefore be killed within the circle or triangle, as the case may be, so that its energy cannot escape. An animal should be selected whose nature accords with that of the ceremony. Thus, by sacrificing a female lamb, one would not obtain any appreciate quality of the fierce energy useful to the magician who was invoking Mars. In such a case, a ram would be more suitable, and this ram should be a virgin. The whole potential of its original total energy should not be diminished in any way. For the highest spiritual working, one must accordingly choose that victim which contains the greatest and purest force. A male child of perfect innocence and high intelligence is the most satisfactory and suitable victim. For evocations, it would be more convenient to place the blood of the victim in the triangle. The idea being that the spirit might obtain from the blood this suitable but physical substance, which was the quintessence of its life, in such manner as to enable it to take a visible and tangible shape. Those magicians who object to the use of blood have endeavoured to replace it with essence. For such a purpose, the incense of Abralim must be burnt in large quantities. Dittany of Crete is also a valuable medium. Both of these essences are very Catholic in their nature and suitable for almost any materialisation. But the bloody sacrifice, though more dangerous, is more efficacious. And for nearly all purposes, human sacrifice is the best. The truly great magician will be able to use his own blood, or possibly that of a disciple, and that without sacrificing physical life irrecoverably. One last word on this subject. There is a magic operation of maximum importance, the initiation of a new aeon. When it becomes necessary to utter a word, the whole planet must be bathed in blood. Before man is ready to accept the law of Thelema, the great war must be fought. This bloody sacrifice is a critical point of the world. The ceremony of the proclamation of Horus, the crowned and conquering child, as the Lord of the Aeon. Despite much speculation, there is apparently very little evidence left that cultures that practiced ancient human sacrifice were Satanists. It is believed that most were pagan, and some historians believe there is no evidence whatsoever that Satanism has ever been considered a mainstream religion or widely followed. In 1980s America, rumours of Satanism and satanic ritual were everywhere, so much so that the era is sometimes referred to as the Satanic Panic. The mainstream media at the time tried to dismiss the Satanic Panic as hysteria. Edward Heath and Jimmy Savile and many other politicians and celebrities were accused of taking part in satanic abuse at this time. This is evidence that at least some of the Satanic Panic was true. The Satanic Bible, written by Anton LaVey, starts with the 9 satanic statements. They are: Satan represents indulgence instead of abstinence. Satan represents a vital existence instead of spiritual pipe dreams. Satan represents undefiled wisdom instead of hypocritical self-deceit. Satan represents kindness to those who deserve it instead of love wasted on ingrates. Satan represents vengeance instead of turning the other cheek. Satan represents the responsibility of responsible instead of concern for physical vampires. Satan represents man as just another animal, sometimes better, but more often worse than those that walk on all fours, who because of his divine spiritual and intellectual development has become the most vicious animal of all. Satan represents all of the so-called sins as they lead to physical and mental and emotional gratification. Satan has been the best friend the church has ever had, for he has kept them in business for all these years. The Satanic Bible talks of 3 types of satanic ritual. It claims there are 3 types of ceremony incorporated in the practice of satanic magic. Each of these corresponds to a basic human emotion. The first of these we shall call a sex ritual. A sex ritual is what is commonly known as a love charm or spell. The purpose of performing such a ritual is to create desire on the part of the person whom you desire, or to summon a sex partner to fulfill your desires. If you have no specific person or type of person in mind strong enough to cause direct sexual feeling accumulating in orgasm, you will not succeed in performing a successful working. The reason for this is that even if the ritual was successful by accident, what good would it serve if you could not take advantage of your eventual opportunity because of a lack of stimulation or desire? It is easy to confuse enchantment for your ulterior motives with spell casting to satisfy your sexual desires. Enchantment is for self-aggrandizement, which, accompanied by ceremonial magic, falls into the category of either the compassion or destruction of ritual, or possibly both. If you want or need something so badly, you are sad or feel much anguish without it, without causing hurt on another's part, then this would incorporate a compassion ritual to increase your power. If you wish to enchant or entrap a deserving victim for your own purposes, you would employ a destruction ritual. These formulas are to be adhered to, as applying the wrong type of ritual towards a desired result can lead to trouble of a complicated nature. A good example of this is the girl who finds herself plagued by a relentless suitor. If she has done little to encourage him, then she should recognise him for the psychic vampire he is, and let him play his masochistic role. If, however, she has enchanted him, giving him every encouragement, and then finds herself a steady object of sexual desire, much to her dismay, she can blame nobody but herself. Such exercises are only ego boosts, born of indoctrination of ego denial, which makes these little bewitchments necessary. The Satanist has enough ego strength to use enchantments to her own sexual gratification or gain power or success of a specific nature. The second type of ritual is of a compassionate nature. The compassionate or sentiment ritual is performed for the purpose of helping others or helping oneself. Health, domestic happiness, business activities, material success and scholarship prowess are but a few of the situations covered in a compassion ritual. It might be said that this form of ceremony could fall into the realm of genuine charity, bearing in mind that charity begins at home. The third motivating force is that of destruction. This is a ceremony used for anger, annoyance and disdain, contempt or just plain hate. It is known as a hex, curse or a destroying agent. One of the greatest fallacies about the practice of ritual magic is the notion that one must believe in the powers of magic before they can be harmed or destroyed by them. Nothing could be further from the truth, as the most receptive victims of curses have always been the greatest scoffers. The reason is frighteningly simple. The uncivilized tribesman is the first to run to his nearest witch doctor or shaman when he feels a curse has been placed upon him by an enemy. The threat and presence of harm is with him consciously, and the belief in the power of the curse is so strong that he will take every precaution against it. Thus, through the application of sympathetic magic, he will counteract any harm that might come his way, this man is watching his step and not taking chances. On the other hand, the enlightened man, who doesn't play any stock in such superstition, relegates the incentive fear of the curse to his unconscious, thereby nourishing it into a phenomenally destructive force that will multiply with each succeeding misfortune. Of course, every time a new setback occurs, the non-believer will automatically deny any connection with the curse, especially to himself. The emphatic conscientious denial of the potential of the curse is the very ingredient that will create its success through setting up in accident-prone situations. In many instances, the victim will deny many magical significance to his fate, even unto his dying gasp. Although the magician is perfectly satisfied so long as his desired results occur, it must be remembered that it matters not whether anyone attaches any significance to your working, so long as the results of the working are in accordance with your will. The super-logical will always explain the connection of magical ritual to the end results as coincidence. Whether magic is performed for constructive or destructive purposes, the success of the operation is dependent on the receptibility of the person who receives the blessing or curse, as the case may be. In the case of a sex or compassion ritual, it helps if the receptant has faith and does believe in magic. But the victim of a hex or curse is much more prone to destruction if he does not believe in it. So long as man knows the meaning of fear, he will need the ways and means to defend himself against his fears. No one knows everything, and as long as there is wonder, there will always be apprehension of the unknown, where there are potentially dangerous forces. It is this natural fear of the unknown, a first cousin to the fascination towards the unknown, that impels the man of logic towards his very explanations. Obviously, the man of science is motivated to discovery by the sense of wonder. And yet, how sad is it that this man who calls himself logical is often the last to recognise the essence of ritual magic. In religious faith, it can make bleeding wounds appear on the body in approximation to the wounds supposedly inflicted on Christ. It is called a stigmata. These wounds appear as a result of compassion driven to an emotional violence extreme. Why then should there be any doubt to the destructive extremes of fear and terror? The so-called demons have the power to destroy in a flesh-rending manner. Theoretically, as much as a handful of nails long rusted away can create blood-dripping ecstasy into the person convinced he is hooked up on the cross of Calvary. Therefore, never attempt to convince a skeptic upon whom you want to place a curse. Allow him to scoff. To enlighten him would be to lessen the chances of success. Listen with benign assurance as he laughs at your magic, knowing his days are filled with turmoil. If he is despicable enough, by Satan's grace, he might even die laughing. On human sacrifice, a Satanic Bible claims, the use of human sacrifice in a Satanic ritual does not imply that the sacrifice is slaughtered to appease the gods. Symbolically, the victim is destroyed through the workings of a hex or a curse, which in turn leads to the physical, mental, or the emotional destruction of the sacrifice in ways and means not attributable to the magician. The only time a Satanist would perform a human sacrifice would be if he were to serve a twofold purpose, that being to release the magician's wrath in throwing a curse, and more important, to dispose of a totally obnoxious and deserving individual. Under no circumstances would a Satanist sacrifice any animal or baby. Whereas Aleister Crowley, in his book, claims that a male sacrifice of perfect innocence and high intelligence is the most satisfactory and suitable victim. There are many sections of Satanism, and personally I see the Church of Satan as not much more than attention seekers and the face of Satanism. It is a mainstream mocking of Christianity more than a true satanic church. It's made for teenagers and musicians that care more about their image and attention than they do about truth. It attempts to feed from the shock and horror it caused most Christians at the time. In 2016, the Satanic panic returned to the United States of America. It was the build-up to the US presidential elections. After years of being exposed online that the world's and the American elite are sometimes connected to Satanism and take part in satanic rituals, many of the Illuminati in American society were about to be exposed like they have never been exposed before. In March 2016, the personal Gmail account of John Podesta, a former White House Chief of Staff and Chair and Counsellor of Hillary Clinton's 2016 disastrous US presidential election campaign, was compromised in a data breach. These emails ended up in the hands of WikiLeaks. In October and November 2016, WikiLeaks published over 20,000 pages of emails from John Podesta's personal email account. The leak caused much of the mainstream media to accuse Russia of being responsible, and doing so to sabotage Hillary Clinton's election campaign. John Podesta, Hillary Clinton, and James Alefantis have neither denied or admitted the authenticity of the emails. Most media, even the mainstream media, accept that the emails are genuine. Many researchers took the time to read the emails and noticed strange code being used within a small amount of them, many references to pizza and hot dogs and other things that sounded out of place and did not make sense in their original context. Upon further research, some people began to believe these emails were actually speaking in a known paedophile code. After noticing that Comic Ping Pong was the centre of many of the emails, some researchers then went to the Instagram account to James Alefantis, who was the owner of Comic Ping Pong baskets. What they found was shocking: children photographed in shopping baskets, taped to tables, and babies and young children being tagged as hotards. Despite these findings, the mainstream media and the police were kind to James Alefantis, and with no police or journalist investigation, and despite real evidence that children are being used as sex slaves by some of Washington's elite, Pizzagate was hastily dismissed as a hoax and fake news. The term fake news was pushed, and before long Pope Francis, a man that asks for priests in the clergy that have raped children to be forgiven, was comparing reading fake news to the consumption of feces. John Podesta is a powerful man with deep political connections to many high-ranking US politicians, including Hillary and Bill Clinton and Barack Obama. He was reportedly in Portugal at the time of Madeleine McCann's disappearance, and he and his brother almost perfectly match the e-fits released by the Portuguese police in relation to the disappearance of Madeleine McCann. The McCanns themselves have been accused of taking part in Madeleine McCann's disappearance by many members of the British public and the Portuguese police. John Podesta is reported to have been staying with Sir Clement Freud in his £1 million villa just a third of a mile from where Madeleine McCann was taken from. Jerry and Katie McCann also stayed there in the aftermath of the disappearance. Sir Clement Raphael Freud was a son of Jewish parents, Ernest Freud, an architect, and Lucy Brosch. In 1933, with the rise of the power of the Nazis in mind, Ernest Freud left Berlin for London, where he settled in St. John's Wood. During the war, Freud joined the Royal Ulster Rifles and served in the ranks. He acted as aide to Field Marshal Montgomery. He worked at the Nuremberg trials in 1947 as a commissioned officer. He served in the Liberal Party from 1973 to 1987. And like his friend Cyril Smith, with whom he shared an office, he received a knighthood for his services to the country. On the 19th of January 2013, the Daily Mirror reported, paedophile MP Cyril Smith was in league with another appalling child sex abuser who set up satanic rituals and raped children as young as 2, the Sunday People discovered. Victim Michael Roberts today bravely puts aside his right to anonymity to tell for the first time how he was only 6 when he was sexually abused by the 29-stone politician. And shockingly, he has revealed his devil-worshipping stepdad, Michael Horgan, organised the horrendous ordeal. Horgan made a deal with the man who went on to be knighted after years as a respected Member of Parliament. Michael Roberts claims that Cyril Smith, who was a close pal of Jimmy Savile, told him he had been a naughty boy before forcing him to take part in a perverted spanking and groping ritual. Now studying for a counselling qualification, Michael fought back his tears as he recalled, "I was frightened of him because of his size, but by then I was getting abused by so many people, I just got used to him." Horgan, who also used the name Sean O'Donnell, became known as the High Priest of Satan. He was jailed for 10 years and placed on the sex offenders register after he was found guilty of 6 sex abuses in 1992. Cyril Smith died in 2010, aged 82. The twisted pair were believed to have bonded initially over their mutual love for Elvis Presley before finding that they shared a sexual interest in children. Abusing the young and vulnerable became an obsession. Horgan organised a series of satanic-themed orgies for like-minded pedos. In one of them, he raped little Michael and an even younger female child before watching others do the same. The monster, whose youngest victim was only 2, also hung up his stepson and the girl on hooks. In further horrendous episodes, he stripped the children naked, blindfolded them and tied them to a cross next to a black magic altar so that his disciples could use them for sex. The users were often filmed to be gloated over later. Horgan also forced the children to carry out disgusting sex acts on other children, including friends of each other. He organised outdoor parties for the activities on Saddleworth Moor, where child killers Ian Brady and Myra Hindley had buried their victims. Youngsters from 2 to 13 were drugged, tortured and sexually abused during the satanic ceremonies. The shock revelation of the Satanist and MP's friendship raises questions over any role Smith and Jimmy Savile may have played in Horgan's paedophile ring. Horgan was also pals with Raymond Hewitt, a child rapist questioned in relation in the disappearance of Madeleine McCann. Michael added, Michael Horgan used to take me out to visit people regularly. It didn't seem that far away. It didn't take us long to get there. We went there in a taxi, just me and Michael Horgan. I can't remember where it was, just that it was a long row of houses and that it wasn't far from where we lived in Rochdale. Michael says that the visits had obviously been set up beforehand, as local MP Cyril Smith greeted him by his first name when he walked in the room. He added, we went into a house and there was a big fat guy. They, meaning Michael Horgan and Cyril Smith, were talking between themselves. It looked like it had been pre-planned because he, Cyril Smith, said, hello Michael. Then he said I had been a naughty boy and I had to be spanked 3 times. He spanked my bum 3 times and then touched me up. He touched my private parts. It didn't last 5 minutes because my stepdad was stood there and said, you've got to go. And that was it. That was the end of it. For some reason, all of a sudden, we had to get back. I don't know why. Never married, Smith's later years were dogged by rumours about his sexuality and allegations of child abuse. According to police reports, prosecutors were given evidence about him in 1970, 1998 and 1999, but no charges were ever brought. He was finally exposed as a paedophile in November last year. The Crown prosecution admitted he should have been charged. One of the victims claimed he was sexually abused in a room in the Houses of Parliament as MPs walked past. Michael said, I nearly fell off my chair when I saw it on the news. I went into shock when I saw him. I thought, oh my God, it finally came out. At the time he abused me, I didn't know who he was. In my mind, I called him the fat man. I smelt a funny smell of him, a musty smell, and there was a musty smell in the house as well. I remember a brownish coffee table in the room, and that's about it. Sir Clement Freud was also accused of multiple counts of rape. He is also the godson of Sigmund Freud. Sigmund Freud is listed under the influential figures on the Black House, also known as the Church of Satan's Wikipedia page, as is Charles Darwin, Herbert Spencer, Eleanor Blavatsky and Benjamin Franklin, with a whole list of other well-known names, as influential individuals to the Church of Satan. Though some of Sigmund Freud's work is still valued as forward-thinking for the time, other parts of his work have been dismissed as unscientific. A new book, Freud, The Making of an Illusion, by Frederick Crews, claims Sigmund Freud was a sadistic fraud with a cocaine addiction and an obsession with sex. It is claimed that he once told one patient that her cough was caused by her unconscious desire to suck her father's penis. Despite overwhelming evidence that John Podesta, Hillary Clinton, Barack Obama and other powerful politicians that work within the American government, police and education system are connected to Satanism and underground paedophile rings such as Comic Ping Pong and shady individuals such as James Alefantos and Marina Abramovich, there has still not been a proper investigation into Comic Ping Pong or John Podesta, Hillary Clinton, Barack Obama and the many others involved. Despite constant denials by the mainstream media projected on the masses, rumours of Satanism and Satanists within our government, entertainment industry and hierarchy will not go away.